And Tamar, if we can go ahead and start the recording, we'll go from here. Good evening. I am so honored to see all of your faces joining us here today. It's beautiful here to see your smiles and from here to feel your generosity as we move forward as a community and thinking about how do we do what we've always done, which is to take care of one another, but to do so in a time of isolation and loneliness, and to nevertheless keep up our core mandate, which is that we touch each other's hearts and we make sure that no one is truly alone. I am so grateful to each of you for thinking about how you might be able to help. We've had a core team who's really put together a strategy about how to get started in reaching out to those in our community who need us. That's been run especially by Amy Karp, who's our main contact on our staff, thinking through this caring effort, and led by our partners at JCFS, who we are so grateful to work with every day and especially today. If you don't know, Anshe Emmett has an official relationship with JCFS, where we turn to Ann Luban and now to Lori Garber Amram as our liaison to the agency to help us think about how we can provide both social service and mental health resources to our community. And that includes resources like this, where we're not on our own, but brainstorming with professionals and the best minds at how we can do this work so wonderfully. And we're lucky to have JCFS. And also, we've really been leaning on our volunteers who are helping us to think through these efforts writ large, especially Jan Schwartz, who's the chair of our caring committee, Julianne Sclaver, the chair of our B Corps Cholim and Senior Friends team, and Irene Kamener, and Stanley Dreyfus, and Amy Eisenstein, who has a background in gerontology and public health and has also been so helpful to us. And there are so many others. Each of you is so important as we consider these efforts going forward and how we can make sure that everyone is seen and heard. This week in our Torah, we transitioned, we opened a new book. We closed the book of Exodus, of Shemot, and we opened the book of Leviticus, of Vayikra. And there's an odd detail in there. There's an odd detail. It says in the beginning of the book of Vayikra that there's this altar with fire on it, and it says the Bnei Aharon, the priests, should put fire on the altar and place wood on the fire, which makes no sense, right? Because you should first place wood, and then you would see a fire, not have a fire and then wood. So the Talmud tells us that the fire that's there is the Ner Tamid, it's the eternal light. God's fire is always burning. But the human being, the Bnei Aharon, the priests, have to put their wood on the fire to make smoke be seen. Otherwise, there would be no smoke. It's only when the humans intervene that others are able to see their connection, to see the smoke, to know that God is there, to know that they are not alone, to know that they're seen. Which is to say, each of us has the job and the opportunity of putting the wood onto the fire. God's fire is always burning and is always there for us. But so often, and right now, we live in an age where we feel desperately alone. And when each of you is willing to pick up the phone and to call someone who is not seeing others, who is feeling frightened, who is feeling just cut off, you are as if placing that wood on the fire. You're doing your bit to make the blessings of our world, the blessings of our community, visible and transparent and accessible, and we couldn't do it without you. We are going to be engaging in a humongous effort. You're going to hear tonight the way that we're going to do that, but we're going to begin, I'll preview for you, by trying to reach out at Anshe Emmett to the 298 individuals who are 75 plus on our roster, to make sure every one of those individuals has a loving and caring phone call that they can receive on a regular basis. That's a big effort, and it's only the beginning. We can only provide this when we have people with open minds and open hearts and the willingness to volunteer your time. And so I am personally grateful to each of you. I know we also have some partners on this call from other synagogues who are listening in to hear from our experts about how can we use our time when we're making a call to lift people up What can we listen for to keep people safe? And so we're grateful for other synagogues also for joining us here today. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Hi, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Tracy Lipsick-Height, and I'm a social worker at JCFS Chicago. And Joe?
I'm Rabbi Joe Ozarowski. I'm the rabbinic counselor and chaplain for JCFS Chicago. And some of you I met when we trained the Bikur Cholim Committee at Anshe. I met Elizabeth Cohen and I trained you a couple of years ago.
So we're going to sort of walk through what we think of as the basics and hopefully give you some hints and pointers based on what's been described to us as the process that you will be going through. So the first thing actually that we're going to do is we are going to take a minute or two and we are going to breathe.
Whoops.
Everybody is experiencing this challenge. Everyone is in the midst of something that doesn't feel like it makes sense, something that is frightening. And so when we make the choice to go and visit, we also, or to make a call, I'm sorry, we also make the choice to set aside our own fears and concerns for a few minutes and focus on somebody else. And it's important usually to transition from that. And so I invite you just to look at the pretty picture and to take a really deep breath and to blow it out. And then to take your shoulders that might or might not be residing somewhere near your ears and take them back down where they belong. And to take another deep breath and let it out. And one more. And let it out. All right. Rabbi Joe is going to lead us in some text study, and I am going to put there we go, text up on the screen. Rabbi Joe, go for it.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to be studying a couple of the classic texts of Bikur Cholim as a grounding for this. And those of you who were part of our session a number of years ago may recognize these texts, although frankly, I'm going to be teaching them just a little bit differently than I did a few years ago because the situation is different and the type of visiting and checking you're going to be doing is going to be a little bit different. And we'll define those as we go along. But let me first define Bikur Cholim very, very broadly. If we had more time, this would be a more interactive discussion, but unfortunately we don't. We're going to cram a lot of material in here in an hour for you. So it's going to be a little more didactic, but there will be time for questions towards the end. Bikur Cholim classically means visiting the sick. We're defining visiting very broadly because you're not going to be in their living rooms or in their skilled nursing facilities or hospital rooms. You're going to be on the phone with them, or maybe in a couple cases having video chats with them. We're going to define cholim also very, very broadly. Some of the people that you'll be talking to would certainly be sick, but a lot of them won't. A lot of them will tell you they're not sick. They may be lonely, or they may be just alone or not lonely. That might be a definition of illness. In the classic Mishiberach, we talk about refuat hanefesh, refuat haguf, healing of the body and healing of the soul. So their souls might not be feeling this well in such a situation when they're sheltering in place and don't want to go out. They're vulnerable. They have other things going on with them. And some of them may be doing just fine. They may not be that lonely. And so for your grounding in yourself, just know that we're simply using the Bikur Cholim text as a platform for looking at ways that we can look at this. And in that sense, I suppose we're following Maimonides. The Rambam, I won't give you the source for it now, but if you're interested, check with me some other time. In his code, though, he does ground Bikur Cholim in the larger mitzvah of Gmilut Chasadim, acts of loving kindness. It's part of that whole category, a galaxy of mitzvot of acts of loving kindness. And what you're going to be doing is sacred work, holy work, which certainly fits into that paradigm of Gmilut Chasadim. So on that note, let's turn to your texts, and you should all have them in front of you. This is one of my favorites. It's a midrash in Midrash Rabbah and Vayikra. And it goes as follows. Rav Huna said, takes away or lessens, removes a 60th of the illness. And this is true of a personal visit. I would posit it's true of a phone visit too. So it comes along this great question. Rav Huna, so they asked Rav Huna, was asked of him, if that's the case in Cain, Yalu Shishim V'yered Imahem Lashuk. Let 60 people visit, or in this case, let 60 people call your visitee, and they'll go to the market together. They'll go to the mall together, or maybe in this case, they will all go together and shop on Amazon Prime because we can't leave our houses to go downtown to go shopping. All right, it's Amazon Prime. So Amar Lahem Shishim, he said 60. No, it doesn't work that way. But it works in some sense if the visitor loves the visitee as they love their own souls. In that case, a percentage, a fraction of the illness will be removed. And I would posit that what the Rav Huna is suggesting is an empathic relationship. Now, when we taught in the course a number of years ago, we taught how to develop empathy in a face-to-face setting. It's more difficult on a phone setting, but we have some suggestions how to do that, and we will get to those very, very shortly. Ovinoto kanafsho means an empathic relationship, a caring relationship. But let's say it's not so empathic. Even without that, marvichin lo, it still helps. So even if you don't do it ideally as well as you think you ought to be doing it, then nobody's grading you on it. It helps. What you do is going to help remove a percentage, a fraction, a little part of the sickness. Which brings now to the second source. It's based in the Torah in Parshat Vayera, Genesis chapter 18, classic text in the Chumash in the Bible. Vayera elav Hashem elonei Mamre, and God appeared to him. Him is Avram Avinu, Abraham, in the terebinth of Mamre. And frankly, I still don't know, after studying this text for a half a century, I don't know what terebinths are. Tree of some sort, I guess, in Mamre. And Abraham was sitting in the tent door in the heat day. And if you remember why Abraham was sitting there, we'd have time to discuss it, but we don't, but I'll have to tell you. It's because Abraham had circumcised himself. And in his late 90s, bruised himself. And Abraham lifts up his eyes and sees three angelic visitors, and the rest of it doesn't really apply to what we're doing tonight. Let's now move to the last text. This is a wonderful midrash tanchuma on that verse. Kevan shenigla alav, when God revealed God's self to Abraham at that moment in those terebinths, God was standing and Abraham was sitting. Shenemar, as the text says in verse 1, he was sitting. He's been sitting. The custom of the world, that when a student is ill and the Rav, the Rebbe, teacher, wants to visit, there's a delegation, the students go first, they come there before the rabbi and say, the Omrim, there's a delegation of the Rebbe to come to the house of the ill person, Lomar, to say, that the Rebbe wants to come and visit. But Kadosh Baruch Hu Eino Kain, the Holy One doesn't work that way. The Holy One's not like that, not so. Kishemal Avraham, when Abraham brished himself, and was feeling pain. Mitztaer in modern Hebrew means I'm sorry, but that's not what it means here. It means tsar, pain. Abraham was in pain after this bris. God tells the angels to go and visit. He said to the angels, my buddy Abe, he isn't feeling so well. Why don't you go down and pay him a call? You might appreciate that. But go do the speaker hole and visit. But before the messengers, whoever they were, got there, God gets there first. God beats out the angels and gets there first. Shenemar, as it says in verse 1, Vayira elav Hashem, God first appears to Abraham. Yachar Cain, only after that, in verse 2, Vayisainav Vayar, does Abraham lifts his eyes and see the visitors, the angelic visitors who get there. Yesh anav gadol mizeh, is there no greater humble one than this? Now, there are several lessons that we learn from this. One, of course, is the idea of presence. Abraham doesn't see God because you generally can't really see God. Abraham perceives God to be there. what is it, like a telephone call or a Zoom meeting, something like that. But God doesn't see Abraham. Abraham doesn't see God. God could certainly see Abraham, but Abraham knows that God is clearly there. That's thing number one that we learn from it. Principle number two is in the last line, that God comes with humility. We learn the lesson of humility from God, God's self. God is the humble one. There's no greater humble one than the Kadosh Baruch Hu, than the Holy One. And so when we come to a visit, even a phone visit, perhaps especially a phone visit, we come with humility. What do we know? How are we going to help this person? The goal may not be to help the person. We may not be able to help the person, but just by being there and being in contact and being in connection with the person, we are doing some good and making a connection. Now, when we teach this, when I taught it a number of years ago, and whenever I teach it, I also invoke a third teaching, which is that there's no dialogue here, neither in the text of the Chumash, in the text of the Torah, or in the Midrash. But there's one last point I'm going to mention before I'm going to teach a little differently following Rashi here. Rashi's commentary says God actually did talk to Abraham. In Rashi's version, God comes and says to Abraham, Abe, how you doing? For a phone visit, you can't just be silent. You can't just have presence. You have to have some verbal contact. And on that note, I'm going to turn it back to my buddy Tracy to talk about what that means. Tracy?
Sorry. Thank you very much, Rabbi Joe. Forgot to unmute. Okay. So what I want to talk about just for a couple of minutes is the fact that, as I mentioned before, this is really a time of uncertainty. Nobody knows when this will be over, how it will end, any of those things. And so usually when people visit or make calls, we're not experiencing the same thing that the people that we are supporting are experiencing. And so we need to just be really conscious of that and really aware of that process of, I always think of it as, I'm going to take all the things that I'm worrying about and thinking about, and I'm going to put them in a little shoebox at my feet. And I'm going to leave them there while I am engaging with this other congregant, knowing that I'll pick them up later, but knowing also that something that they say may trigger me to automatically pick up that box and sort of engage with it again. And so I think it calls for us to be especially self-compassionate and especially kind to ourselves. And, if we get triggered during the call, to talk to somebody afterwards. Everybody's emotions are kind of on high alert. The other thing I want to mention is that the person that you're talking to may have a very different experience than you are. And if you call more than one person, different people that you talk to may have very different experiences from one another. And so I always try to come at these experiences with curiosity. What can you tell me about what this is like for you? The good, the bad, the hard, the whatever it is, but really coming with an open heart and curiosity. My experience over the years is that the people who volunteer for things like this have very active fix-it genes. So we are often the people who like to help and make things better. And, most of this situation we can't make better. It's one of the reasons that I love the first text that Rabbi Joe teaches about taking away 1/60th of the pain, right? It's not nothing, but there's still a lot that's left there. And to understand that we're going to hear about things that we cannot necessarily fix, and that when we feel that little fix-it gene pop up in the back, that flag go up, we need to say, oh yeah, that's me. I really wish that I could fix this, and it's hard that I can't. And just allow ourselves to sit with that. So we are going to do a couple of things. We're going to teach you kind of what the call can look like. And we're going to do that first by role-playing the call. And then we're going to break down kind of what went into the call. So there we go. So here are the goals of the call. To make a connection, right? We like to say showing up is 90% of the visit. Calling them knowing that we are reaching out is an enormous part of this. You are assessing for acute needs, and we're gonna give you some examples of that. You are going to offer an ongoing connection, and then in closing, offering a final blessing or a good wish for that congregant. So I am going to turn this over for a moment to Rabbi Joe while I get the next thing ready. Uh-oh, was I not showing you the right? No, I was. Okay. All right, Rabbi Joe, take it.
Okay, let me just get the right text here in front of me. We're going to model this in just a second. Actually, you ready, Tracy? Can I start it with you right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Go for it.
Very, very good. Keep in mind, we're not going to ask you to analyze this call too deeply because it's going to be a 5-minute call and we can't cover everything. Your calls will probably be, assuming the call is accepted, and they may not be, it'll be a bit longer than that. We're going to give you an example of the kinds of things that you could do on a call with an outline and a bit of a script. So on that note, here we go. Ding-a-ling-a-ling.
Hello.
Hello, is this Tracy?
Yes, it is. Who is this? Who are you?
Hello, Tracy. My name is Joe Ozarowski. I'm a member of Congregation Anshe Emet. We're part of the Caring Committee, the Chesed Committee. That's your synagogue as well. And we're just reaching out to many of our members who may be stuck at home, aren't able to go out. And I called really to say hello and see how you were doing. How are you doing today?
I don't think I know you. Do I know you?
No, I don't think we've ever met before. It's a big congregation. There are a lot of people in it. Don't think I've ever had the pleasure, but I'd like to get to know you.
Okay. I guess I can talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Tell me, how are you doing today?
Well, I don't know. It's an okay day. I'm really tired of being stuck in my apartment. I haven't been able to leave my apartment for 2.5 weeks. I can't even go to the grocery store. My daughter won't let me leave.
Wow. That must be incredibly difficult not to be able to leave and your daughter trying to take care of you that way. Wow.
It is. It's really hard. I get kind of mad at her sometimes.
This situation can do a lot of things to people. We're all under pressure that way. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions if that's okay. May I? Just to see how things are for you. Would that be all right?
Okay. Oh, I guess okay.
Okay. Let me ask you this, and I'm not trying to be too nosy, but we do care about you. Are you set up all right with food, with medicine, or anything like that? Is there anything you need?
Oh, no, I'm fine with that. My daughter takes care of everything that I need.
Good. You're very lucky to have that. I'm going to ask you a question. I apologize if it sounds intrusive, but we are trying to, help people, offer resources. And if you don't want to answer me, you don't have to. But are you okay financially in terms of covering your needs?
Well, I have been. It's really been okay. I'm on a fixed income, but my daughter sends me all the food that I need, and when I need it, she covers my medications. But so yesterday, I found out that my son-in-law lost his job, and my daughter still has her job, but I don't know if they're still going to be able to do that. So I don't know.
I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm very sorry to hear that. One of the resources that the synagogue has is the people that work with our committee, the coordinators, may have access to various resources that might be helpful if you might need them, and we can certainly talk about that. Let me ask you.
Okay, right now I don't need anything though. Right now I'm fine.
Good, thank you very much. I'm very glad to hear that. Tell me, how has your mood been?
Well, I guess it was okay enough until my son-in-law lost his job. I'm just tired of being stuck in, and every time I turn on the news, I just get mad that people are like out and they're in. I have to be home and they're all out doing things. It doesn't make sense.
Yep, doesn't make sense at all. And you're not alone. It really doesn't make sense. How are your spirits? Do you have anything that you lean on for hope?
Well, the highlight of my day is my grandson calls me every day. Sometimes just for like 2 minutes, but he always calls me, and I look forward to that call all day long.
That's nice. You got nachas, as they say in Yiddish, nachas von the Einiglach, nachas from the grandchildren. You have that kind of support. I'm so happy to hear that. I'm going to have to get off the phone shortly, but I wanted to ask you, would it be okay if I called you next week about once a week just to check in and see how you were doing?
Well, why would you want to do that? I don't even
Because
know you.
I know you don't, but I hope I'll get to know you. And we just want to check in and see and connect that way. If you'd rather not, that's okay. But if you'd like to, it doesn't cost anything. And I can call around this time next week for a few minutes just to say hello and see how you are.
Kind of like my grandson does.
Kind of like your grandson does. Maybe I could be a surrogate grandson or something.
Well, you sound a little bit old to be my grandson, but if you want to call, I guess you could.
That's very kind of you. I thank you so much for talking with me. And I want to give you a little blessing, a little bracha. May God above be able to help you ease the loneliness. May all of us who belong to the same community help you through this difficult period. And may you enjoy in some way and form a Zisen Pesach, a happy Passover.
Well, thank you very much. And you too. Thank you for calling.
Thank you so much for talking with me. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Talk to you next week.
So one of the things we want to point out about this conversation is it's condensed, right?
Very.
So the chit-chatty part, the conversation part certainly could have gone on much longer than it did. We chose to use this amount of time for that activity.
That's right. That's right. I want to point out one thing, and then we have a video we're going to try to show you. If you noticed, I was doing a lot of verbal responses with and yes and oh and things like that, which are not necessarily the kind of responses you would need to do in a face-to-face setting. Those of you of a certain generation will remember Carl Rogers, and it's based on his thinking and his approach to psychotherapy. But in a phone call, it's absolutely essential that you give verbal cues that you're listening to them. Otherwise, they may think you're playing games or doing email or something else on the screen. And if you are, you need to hide it very, very much and really be present for them. So it's always great to use verbal cues.
I just want to acknowledge that I see somebody has their hand up and we have a time at the end to take questions. So I promise we will get to it.
Yes, thank you for doing that though.
All
okay,
right.
Ready for the video?
Let's hope you can all hear this.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Okay. Was everybody able to hear that?
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Hold on. I got to make it stop.
Okay.
No, go away. All right.
Okay. Let me continue a little bit, and then Tracy's going to give you some details. I want to sort of deconstruct the phone call a little bit. If you notice, I asked some specific questions, and I guess we're sort of following Maslow's hierarchy of needs, though you don't have to do it in that order, but it does make some sense. Asking about their physical needs. I was asking about food, medicine, finances, asking, and by the way, if there are issues, you might want to talk to your coordinator. Tracy will talk about that in a minute. I asked about their emotional needs, and there are referrals that we can make. I should probably point out right now that JCFS has a warm line, and we can send you the details how to reach that. It's our 855 number, the regular JCFS number, but you can refer them to mental health counselors who can talk to them about their mood, and chaplains who can talk about spiritual issues. When you ask about leaning on for hope and how your spirits, those are spiritual issues. And keep in mind that we can't fix things, as Tracy mentioned, and also some things may be beyond our training or our comfort level, and you can always make referrals and talk to your coordinator. Tracy?
Okay. So what you're seeing is the handout that was emailed. So if some of you didn't open it, which would make complete sense, that's you will have it in your hot little hands. One of the things that I want to sort of circle back to is that way of ensuring connection. For those of us who sometimes depend on visual cues for connection, seeing somebody smile or nod or do any of those things, those disappear in a telephone call. So we need to often replace those things with a well-placed mm-hmm or oh, and sort of small verbal responses that will act as reminders that we are here. We also have to remember that many of the people we're calling may have issues around hearing, and so they may need to be louder than we're generally used to doing. So there are some tips that we want you to sort of hold in the back of your head in terms of recommendations, things to think about as people are sharing some of their challenges. So one of them is limiting exposure to TV, radio, internet, news, to no more than once or twice a day. A lot of older people are used to keeping the TV on and keeping the news on kind of all day as a background company. And this can be a really, really hard time to have that be the background company. And so, you know, sharing with people the idea of turning off the TV, finding a different channel, turning on the radio to music, something along those lines can be really good. Another good tool can be helping people focus on the here and now. There's a lot of fear about the future and the unknown, and the truth is that we don't know about the future and the unknown. And people can really start to spin out on all of those fears. And so particularly when people are really, really anxious, it can be really helpful to kind of ground them in the now. And so what I'll sometimes say to people is, okay, so let's just focus on today and right now. And when we get off the phone, what is the thing that you should do next? Should you make lunch? Should you, help them find those really concrete things that will recenter them in their day? Another thing to do is ask people if they, no one gets to their 70s without having had really rough times in their lives. And so if they're talking about this being really, really rough, ask them, what previous rough times have you had? And how did you cope with those situations? And, are there things that you can use from what you did in the past to help you with now? One of the things that I think we managed to leave out of the sheets, even though we talked about it 3 times, is the idea of gratitude. And so sharing with someone, you know, that thinking of at least 1 or 2 things each day that you are grateful for can, again, be a really, really useful way to sort of stop spinning out. We want to talk to people, or have the opportunity to talk to people, about the importance of being active and the importance of fresh air. So if you are somebody who's elderly and you know, it is recommended that you not leave your home, you have to be a little bit more creative about that. So if you are lucky enough to have a balcony, you might go on the balcony. Maybe you step out and stand in your doorway. Maybe you open your window. Something that allows you to connect with the outside, something that allows them to get some sort of exercise, whatever that is. You know, it might be walking up and down the hallway in their building. It might be walking around. It might be walking in place, but something to get their bodies moving. If they have the opportunity, taking care of pets or plants. And the other thing that I always like to recommend to people is that they do service. So for them to think about people that they know who are isolated, and for them to reach out to those people, because all of us know that doing service is a fabulous way to get out of your own head and leave you with really, really good feelings. So we put together some tips. We talked about just the importance of listening and trying to imagine what it might be like for the person on the other end. So sometimes just naming those feelings, loneliness, helplessness, powerlessness, angry, whatever it is, don't worry. If you name the wrong feeling, they'll be happy to correct it for you. And then also just paying attention to our own feelings. What does it feel like? And we may need to wait to be connected to that until we get off the call, but what does it feel like to listen to people who might be feeling lonely or isolated or scared or whatever it is? So a few typical triggers. Your anxiety can be contagious and your calm can be contagious, right? As anyone who has ever parented a small child, or even not been the parent but been around a small child, you know, they fall down and they look at you to find out if this is something they should worry about or not. And so if we can come at these calls by being really calm, that will absolutely serve us well. Don't give medical advice. We give some examples after the script of things that people might ask and ways to respond. But certainly that is no one's role, is to give medical advice. And don't share what you heard, because it may not be accurate, because there's so much information out there and it's really hard to know what's accurate and what's not. And even if you feel like you have the right information, that's not really a role that you want to get into. So just really quickly, I will show you. Here is your sample script, and then here are possible questions that people could ask and possible responses that you can get. So I think we are ready for questions. So Manya, did you have a question? Can you unmute and... Sorry, I had not been looking at the chat. So for those who lost audio, I apologize. If we call and get voicemail, is there a script for what to say in the message? There is not, although
we should probably write one.
We can either write one, or I think you could probably take the opening that is written and use that, and then just let them know if you're going to try to reach them again.
Right. Identify yourself, who you are, and why you're calling, who you're calling from, and exactly what Tracy said.
Other questions? I know that when Rabbi Joe and I are done, Amy's going to talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of how all of this is going to work.
This is drawer. I just want to add for everyone, or underscore something that Tracy, you said earlier. It was that when you all did the reenactment of the conversation, you skipped the chit chat, which makes sense because you, I think, showed us the most challenging parts of the conversation. But I just want to say the chit chat really matters. It really matters to show your love and curiosity, and a warm conversation would look like getting to know the other person. So there was a moment I thought that was so authentic of Joe, you and Tracy talking and saying, "Oh, I don't really know you." I imagine that's a moment where if I were on the phone, I would say, "I want to get to know you. Tell me about you." Right? And where were you born? And what have you done? And what's in your life? Right? People aren't going to start opening up to us about their difficulties and sadnesses when we're still strangers. They're going to do that when we establish a level of intimacy and authentic connection.
Appreciate that, Drawer. Thank you very much. That adds a great deal to it. Thank you.
My guess also, Tracy, is that there are people who are going to see an unusual cell phone number and they're not going to pick up because they're not going to recognize it. Mine, I'm sure mine, like many, is an out-of-state number. People are not going to know who I am or what I am. I would just assume I'm just going to leave a message saying who I am, identifying myself, and say maybe I'm going to call you back in the next day. Is there a specific way of handling that situation?
I think that, as you pointed out, you can say this is an unfamiliar number, and that may be why you didn't pick up. I'm going to call back, I'm going to try you again tomorrow at the same time, or something along those lines. But, leaving a message about who you are, speaking slowly and clearly so people can understand you, I think is the way to go with that.
Agreed.
Taylor, you had a question?
Yeah. So, well, a couple. I hope one of them is small. You mentioned like sort of leaving our own experiences at the door before the call, and I can see how that makes sense for us to just be able to listen and focus on them. But I kind of wonder, like, what if something they mentioned, like, what if we have some experience that resonates based on what they're telling us, and we can use that to connect with them, without like overbearingly being like, it's about me, but like just sort of support them with like some little tidbit.
Yes. Yeah. It's not that it's not a therapy session. So it's not that you can't bring any of you. What I think about is what you don't want to bring in is your fears and your concerns.
Okay.
Right. So you want to bring in who you are,
Mm-hmm.
but not that, you're really worried about whatever it is that you're worried about.
Okay. That makes sense. And then
I want to add can I add something to that, Taylor? Just to add a little footnote. In chaplaincy training, which is the professionalized version of all of this, we are taught that while you leave yourself at the door, actually you don't leave yourself at the door. You carry it inside you. And as Tracy said, you don't share it necessarily at that moment. I would say it depends on what point in the relationship it comes up. My feeling is that you shouldn't do that in the early part of the conversation, because I think it gets in the way of the relationship. But there will come a point, there's no one specific point, you will know it inside when they will be ready to receive something that you might find helpful to make the connection. But probably not really early on, because again, they still don't know you.
That makes sense. And then at the very end, when we're sort of finishing off and asking, would they like another call, should we then ask if they would like it to be a video call, if they have that capacity? Would that be a good thing?
Yeah. If that's something that they know how to do and are comfortable with, I think that's a great way to do it.
Sure, you can ask, you can always ask.
And I would add to that, Taylor, I appreciate that. I think many folks don't actually necessarily yet know how to do that. So something really helpful and concrete that you might offer, if somebody says, oh, I'd like to, but I don't really get it, is you can say, oh, if you'd like to try it out, I'd be happy to try to help you learn how to do that.
Okay, or we could ask first, do you know how? And then ask.
Or have you ever, or any of those things.
Right. There are a lot of grandparents that, FaceTime with their kids and their grandkids.
That's right.
My grandparents in their 90s somehow figured it out, but they never even used a computer.
And we do have some volunteers who are willing to teach, who have the patience of saints and able to teach, how to Zoom and how to FaceTime if they haven't done it and you're not as comfortable in the teaching mode for that. We do have people who are offering to help.
Thanks for the questions, Taylor.
Yep. Any other questions? Otherwise, we're going to turn it over to Amy. Amy, you're
It looks like Linda had a question.
Linda has a question.
Linda.
Alan does too after Linda.
Linda, can you unmute yourself?
I'm doing that now. Can you hear me now?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, my question is, shall I make the assumption that we're calling without any introduction, that it's just, this is everyone over a certain age that we're reaching out to, so that it's really a cold call, correct? Am I correct in that? Okay. Now, the other question is, if we hear that there's an issue around a basic need, such as in the last example, a case example of maybe a food concern, is it up to us to know some of the resources, or do we immediately at that point come back to you and say, here's what I've heard, would you take it from there? Here's what I heard, this is what was discussed. Is that correct, that we come to you, and who is that?
Troy, do you want to take that? Do you want me to?
I'm happy to. It is not your job to know resources. It's your job to be friendly and kind and warm, and to hear when there's a need, and whenever there's a need, to go ahead and say just kindly, oh my gosh, I would love to help to think about what resources might exist. Is it okay if I reach out to my volunteer coordinator, because I know they have some ideas? And each person is going to be assigned a volunteer coordinator. Those people have excellent resources and maybe know exactly what to do. And if they don't know, then they'll come to the staff, which could include JCFS, or could include the clergy, or could include Amy. But we're trying to kind of tier that up in a way that makes sense. So it's not, you do not need to know about any resources.
You're finding out.
Excellent plan, thank
Do
you.
your
Thank you.
I think there was one other person that I thought had a question after.
I had a.
Arthur?
Yeah.
I
Can
just
you
had
hear
the
me?
same- Yes, she had the same question. I wanted to know if these were cold calls or whether the person had requested it, and they haven't requested it. We're assessing whether they want people to call them.
That's exactly correct. Thanks, Alan.
Okay.
It looks like Arthur had a question, and I think Karen has a question.
Yeah. My question is, can you hear me first? Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
My question is, what about Pesach? And specifically, the Seder is a big social event for lots and lots of people. What sort of facilities are available for people to experience? I mean, I'm going to do a Seder on Zoom with my kids, but what about people who don't know about Zoom? What can we tell them about that?
So actually, we're going to have several things available through the synagogue, and we'll try to get you that specific information. But Chazan Mizrahi and Rabbi Siegel will be recording a Seder that people can make use of, if that's helpful to them. And
Okay.
we'll also be happy to match people up, just like we would match people up to be hosted by someone in particular in person. We're happy to match people up with a virtual Seder that they can be a part of with another congregant.
Okay.
So those are things
that
we're happy to provide.
if that question comes up, the answer is to refer these people to my coordinator.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
And we will make sure that the volunteer coordinators have all of that information ready.
Okay, great.
Karen, it looked like you had a question.
Yes. Well, actually, I want to just follow up with that. Do we refer them to the volunteer coordinator, or do we get to contact the volunteer coordinator and get back to them, or do whatever the volunteer coordinator says to do for either whatever?
Generally speaking, I think what's so special is to create the connection between you and that person directly.
Okay.
So you do the homework for them, right? So you'll say, oh, that's such an interesting question. What might the shul have available for Pesach? I'm not sure, but I know there's something. Let me check it out and get back to you. And then
Okay.
she'll tell you, oh, you're not going to believe blah, blah, blah. And you'll come back and say, I checked it, first of all, which feels good. I checked it out. I heard you, right? And here's what I learned. And then, you'll know what the next steps are from there.
So it sounds like in every phone call, we're going to offer the opportunity, there may be follow-up. There might be an issue that comes up that for sure we're going to follow up with. In the example that you just role played, that was role played, maybe where that person was not having difficulty right now, but there was a chance, there was some worry. Maybe that one we keep in our own docket and we call back if they agree for us to call back, I guess. And maybe other people, we just ask if they want to have a call, if we can check in with them in a week and follow what they say. Is that?
That's right. That's right. And another resource that you're always able to say is if somebody sounds really upset, really worried, I would love it if you would say, I know that the rabbis really care about you. And I'm wondering if this is something you would like to talk about with one of the rabbis, because I've heard directly from them that, they would love to talk to you, to anyone around something like this. So you can always say that.
Okay. But in the example that was given, the role play, is that something where you wouldn't necessarily contact a volunteer coordinator, but you would make a note to yourself to follow up if they agree for you to follow up? Okay.
Agreed, Karen. I agree.
Thanks. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have other questions? Or kind of go forward with what the process will look like from now on?
Hi, Julianne. Could I just say something?
Of course, Julianne.
Hi, it's Julianne. Thank you all so much for volunteering and for your time tonight. I just wanted to reiterate that, and I think that some people seem, I'm not sure if everybody understands that not all of this is going to be problem solving on these phone calls. And you don't have to anticipate that you're going to run into challenges with some of these people, with some of our congregants. Certainly there is a lot of concern and a lot of uncertainty, but really the objective is just to number one, certainly to check in on them, but then the follow-up is really going to be friendly conversation moving forward. So you're not always going to have to find resources or help them resolve some problems or questions, but the follow-up really moving forward hopefully will be just calling them and having a friendly conversation with them. So don't be concerned about having resources or not knowing answers to questions. Hopefully the follow-up will be just friendly visits, just like you check in on relatives, friends, colleagues, and coworkers. This is someone else to add to your weekly list of phone calls. So we're not really, we're there to solve problems, but this is, in addition, really our goal is these friendly phone calls. So it's not all doom and gloom. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Julianne, for pointing it out. The purpose of this program. Oh, go ahead, Dror.
Yoni, go ahead, Yoni.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So are we going to receive a standard format for the way we bring information back up to the volunteer coordinators, whether that's even if it's not anything essential, but just letting people know that this person is all fine and doesn't have any issues? Or is that going to be non-standardized and we should just talk on a case-by-case basis?
Well, Amy, why don't you explain what our system is and how we think this is going to work going forward? And I think that'll answer your question, Yoni.
Hi, everybody. First of all, thank everybody for volunteering to get involved in this project. This is just phase one of the project as we target our seniors who we think are the most homebound of our people. So as we're going forward, what's going to happen is I have created a sheet. I have assigned everybody anywhere between 4 and 6 names. Some of them are married couples, so the numbers are a little lower than the 298. And you're going to be given an Excel sheet that has their contact information, the names, their phone numbers, and there'll be a checkoff box for you to indicate when you've called them and who your volunteer coordinator is. Our goal is for you to maybe call once a week for the next several weeks to maintain a connection with some of these people if they choose to do it. Not all will. Some will tell you that they're fine, they have kids, whatever. And you'll find that some are just really lonely people that really want a conversation. You're just going to have to kind of judge it for yourself and let us know one way or the other if you're going to be continuing.
Can I add a point?
Of course.
If you have so many people who want a relationship and it's more than you can handle, that's fine. You're just assessing. If you can't take it on, we'll assign them a permanent one.
Right. We do have some who are Russian speaking only. So we do have a couple of volunteers who are fluent in Russian that will take on that responsibility. The other thing is, if a phone number does not work, please let me know. Send me an email or call me and let me know. That means that something is wrong in our database and that we need to fix it from our end. And if you have people that are responding that, you know, they can't go to the grocery store, that's when you're going to go to your volunteer coordinator and we'll figure out a way of taking care of it, whether it's Instacart or Amazon Delivers or Fresh Start or whatever it is. It's not your responsibility to pay for groceries or get involved in that aspect of it. We'll figure out a way for making it work. I just want to put that out there. I don't want you to feel like you need to do all the grocery shopping for some of these people who are homebound. We have lots of other resources that we can send you as you get into your conversations. But as Julianne said, the most important thing is just building a connection and making people feel like you care. That's the number one thing, is that the synagogue cares, you care personally, and that we just want to make sure that everybody is okay. Because this is a really hard time and everybody's feeling it in different ways. But especially for some of the senior citizens who may be in one of the independent living facilities where they're literally in their rooms 24/7, it's incredibly lonely because they're used to socialization and now they have absolutely none. So the idea of a phone call, reaching out, wishing them a Shabbat Shalom, saying that you're thinking of them, it's all good.
And I'm gonna, and to augment that, if you reach out 3 times over the course of 2 days and you don't get through, just go ahead and flag that for your volunteer coordinator. I tried calling Mr. Cohen 3 times. At these times I didn't get through. I'm not sure what that means. And then we'll be able to try to help assess what's going on. And Yoni, to your question, you only need to flag for your coordinator if you can't get through, you've got a wrong number, or there's an issue to address. Other than that, go ahead and continue making those calls and making those connections. And we're going to assume that if we don't hear back from you, it means that you had a positive connection, there's no concerns, and you're beginning to build a friendly relationship that you're taking forward.
So hopefully by either late tonight or early tomorrow morning, I will have everything emailed out with all of your names and phone numbers and emails. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For all you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a great meeting. Thank you.
So I want to thank everybody. There's an email coming from Amy with all of the attachments that also has an evaluation. We've had some other organizations curious and interested in this, and so your feedback about how effective it was and how useful it was would be really helpful for us going forward. And congratulations, and may you call in good health.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Anybody has questions after the
Thank you,
fact, they can
Amy.
always call myself or Dror or Tracy or Rabbi Joe.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
Thank
much.
you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Back.